Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest is a forward-thinking entrepreneur. He's a multi-time founder who isn't scared of doing things his own way. He's passionate about leveling the playing field for creative talent around the world. His company is revolutionizing the creative services industry with the world's leading AI-powered creative service, trusted by over 500 brands. Please welcome, from Oslo, Norway, founder and CEO at Superside, Fredrik Thomassen. Hey, Fredrik.
Hi, David. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited for this. I've been looking forward to this conversation. We're going to go right into that first question. So what is the one thing that you've done at Superside, big or small, that's had the biggest impact, and you'll absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future, which my guess is, of all people, you probably will be. So what is that one thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe, you can ask my wife, but I think I have more companies in me. It takes a toll, of course, and especially on young founders. And I guess I started this company when I was, 26, 27. And as a young entrepreneur, you're really just trying to look for advice, and you're very malleable, and you read articles on the internet, and then you sort of try to adopt many of those things in your own company. Sometimes it works, and sometimes or maybe most of the time, it doesn't work really. And I think for me, gaining the confidence to think for myself has been the one thing that has made the most impact. We would try things like OKRs, and we kind of read out Google, a very successful company. I'm sure OKRs is like fantastic, and then you try it, and it just, at least for our context, kind of sucks, right? It just creates an enormous amount of bureaucracy, and takes a ton of time for people, and it also forces people to think in sort of a certain way, in a framework kind of way, and it it kind of makes for the entire organization. It stops the entire organization to think for themselves. So so that would be my one thing.
I really like this. I think I want to go down deeper on the OKR discussion. So do you do anything like OKRs? Like, do you do a variation, or just the whole process of the goal setting and tracking and everything that doesn't make sense for Superside?
So I think the OKR thing for us kind of became this tool for everyone to navigate kind of KPIs and measurement and performance. It became like very political kind of, and everyone was kind of concerned about how to write their OKRs in a way where at the end of the quarter it would be everyone would be seen in a good light, and I think we have very honest, good people. I don't think anyone did this in with bad intent. We don't have a lot of politics, and so it was kind of the tool or the way of working that forced it down that path. And there were still a lot of believers in OKRs, and organizations said, we just need to like try one more time, and do it this way, that way. But at the end of the day, we shifted to a completely different approach, which is something we just invented ourselves around just everyone sharing their top problems right now. And so every quarter we'll do kind of a quarterly business review where people share the number 1, 2, 3 things that they're worried about, concerned about, the problems they have, and then we try to solve those problems. And for me, it was just like, a lot of anxiety off my shoulders. These are, all of the problems that I'm facing, and then everyone just responds so positively. I have all these ideas for, how to solve these problems, and let's work together on solving these problems. And for me, at least, that's been amazing. And I think a lot of other people as well, have felt that it's been really nice to talk about the problems that we're facing in our company, and then just try to solve those problems. I mean, any startup, any company has a lot of problems, and I don't think there's any reason to pretend that you don't have problems.
I really like that. I think first of all, the thing about the OKRs, when you just said it that way, it's interesting. It's basically human nature, right? I mean, you want to do, if you're a high top performer, you want to do well, and so when you're given, okay, how am I going to write my goals? You want to hit those goals. You want to structure it. I mean, to your point, it's not malicious. It's just, especially for the top performers, that's probably the way that they're thinking about that. But then it creates almost a weird dynamic where are you working on the right things at the right time? Are you just trying to check off those OKRs, right? I mean, that's
Exactly. And then I mean, I mean, we also have a lot of very smart people that, I mean, they come from, consulting or, finance, or, very smart people, um, and they really like for things, and myself included, kind of, and really like for it to be kind of logical. And OKRs is like really nice, it's just like top 3 company goals, and then it like flows down into more kind of departmental goals, and it's all kind of adds up in this like very logical, messy kind of way. But I think that type of logic is a little bit overrated, and it took me a long time to realize that maybe it's better to look at the world through a different lens, and a lens that looks at the world as this chaotic, complex place where things are a little bit more organic, and where you kind of have to have some vision in your idea. And I think working with a lot of designers sort of taught me this way of thinking, because in the world of design you can kind of create anything. Anything is possible, and so kind of you can't try out every option and rule out every option and be like all logical about it. It doesn't really work. There's not a lot of artists that work in this kind of logical, deductive way. And so for me, that's been a huge inspiration to be like, okay, we kind of just need to be like, this is what we're going to try to do, and not think so much about whether it's kind of entirely logical or if it fully makes sense in every shape
yeah.
or form.
Well, I like think for yourself. I think that message is a really good message. I put out an episode a couple weeks ago that was all about the advice that people would give themselves, and one of the things I said is trust your gut, which I think is a different way of saying the same thing. Where I would have people tell me this is the way you should do it. Investor would tell me you must hire this person with this profile, and I'm like, I don't really know if that at 20 something. I said, well, the investor
Mm.
must know because they've invested in,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
100 companies, and and then you realize that it's your company. It's your company. It's your business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I fully endorse that, or at least, I think with, at least in my mind, it's like think at least listen to your gut. I mean,
Right.
you don't have to at least for me, I don't entirely listen to the gut, although I think that would also lead me astray. But very often, and this is, I think, for me especially true in like hiring processes, and we've hired at this point, hundreds or maybe in the thousands of people, and we try to be like very kind of systematic about it. And I think we're still pretty systematic about it, and we have all of these kind of, again, frameworks for hiring, and especially for a long time we were very concerned about not having any biases in our hiring, and we still are very concerned about not having biases in our hiring. But creating a hiring process to be perfectly logical and completely avoid biases is like a different objective than just trying to like listen to your gut in a hiring process, where you be something is like off with this guy, like, and I can't like, he checks all of the boxes and it's entirely logical. He went to the fancy university, and he went to like a top tier consulting company or something. This isn't an actual person, of course, but then there's just something that you can't really explain what it is. And 9 times out of 10 for me, if I've kind of made a hiring decision sort of in spite of that gut intuition, it's gone kind of the wrong
That's exactly,
way.
that is literally what I said. I literally said the exact same. maybe not every time, but 9 times out of 10, when there's that spidey feeling, you're right, you're correct. It's just, but someone told you, oh, but they had these things, they checked all these boxes, everyone else liked them except for you. Why are you the only person who didn't like them?
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to be in that minority.
Yeah. Another thing, we talked about, and you've raised money, from investors, and you've built this business, and you've kind of evolved the model of the business over time. And I think that also falls, in my opinion, a little bit in this think for yourself mantra. Can you talk maybe a little bit about the evolution of the company and kind of how you started and where you are today?
Absolutely. We've been very adaptive, and maybe too adaptive, but we started out as just an incredibly lean company. I think it'd be hard pressed to find a leaner company than us starting out. Kind of just built a website. In the website, there was a chat where you could send tasks that you wanted to get done, and then we would kind of receive all of those tasks from just random people on the internet. I don't know how they sort of found our website, but random people on the internet just found this website, and be like, hey, can you help me with, you know, this design, make a website, help us do some
Literally just
research.
in a chat bot. Just in a chat box.
Yeah, I think we used like Zendesk's, chat widget or something, and this was the entire website. People would submit these tasks, and then we would do it either ourselves, or we would then pay with our own private money some freelancer on Upwork or Fiverr or something like that to help us out if there was some specific skill that we needed. Um, and then when the task was done, we would send it back to the customer and be like, we spent, 25 hours on this. Can you just maybe pay us like, I don't know, $500 or something like that? And then half the time people would do that. Half the time people would be like, this is total crap. Like,
wait, you did not take payment, but you didn't take a payment method before?
no credit card, no nothing. Just like, just this was the vision to make just work on the internet to be kind of as friction free as possible. And for many there were for many instances it worked quite well, but sadly the internet is filled with trolls and scammers and spammers, and so it didn't really work long term, and we needed to start adding a credit card. Then we started seeing that way too often people would say that this work is crap, where we can't pay you, and it would be kind of honestly like, because we didn't maybe know what we were doing,
Right.
we didn't have kind of expertise, and so it was kind of also fair, and so we needed to build processes internally, and kind of over time we said, oh, now we need to have a better brief from the customer, we can't just have this chat. And then over time our company kind of started looking more like curated, managed marketplace, kind of trying to take on Upwork and Fiverr. And then over time now, we kind of moved significantly up market, and we're starting to compete against the creative agencies. And so it's very much a story of kind of very adaptive company trying to find better and better and better product market fit over time, guided by this vision from the start of trying to create more equal opportunities in the world and accelerating the world's transition to online work. I think it's going to be a profound transition in the 21st century, and we want to be part of that. And I think now in our current iteration, we have something very interesting. Obviously, kind of 2 years ago, when the first foundational LLM models came out and we started seeing how amazing they were, we were kind of, okay, it's time to kind of pivot the company again for like the 5th time or something like that, to try to be the world's leading AI-powered creative services company. And I think we are on very good track to achieving that vision now. But if we hadn't been willing to kind of constantly sacrifice our ideas from the past and again and again sort of think for ourselves, we wouldn't have been in this position now, and now it's really starting to be quite interesting actually, and we're getting a lot of attention from from investors and people that want to kind of acquire the company, people that want to work for the company, people that want to partner with the company, and so um, I think this whole thesis of professional services becoming AI powered is really becoming kind of a very commonplace thesis to have. A lot of people buy into that thesis. It didn't used to be like that. I mean, we were sort of a tech-enabled services company for the longest time, and most VCs and like investors and so on would be like, your service is not so interesting. But now people are saying but now people really believe it's different. People believe that the delivery model might not necessarily be kind of AI agents for everything or like full software for everything, but maybe kind of this super agency or, that delivers kind of a bunch of kind of AI tools collectively put together in a package that is easy for an enterprise or small business company to ingest.
So as you've adapted each of you talk about reinventing yourself 4 or 5 times. I have engaged with, seen myself in my own career. Like I've seen it. It's hard to do that. I mean, it's hard to do that because you have to do the change management with your company. You have to do the change management with the market, with your customers, with your investors. Like, how worried are you each time you go through that adaptation, that evolution? How worried are you? Or maybe a different way of saying is like, how much energy do you spend on that change management? Do you go and talk to everyone and say, hey, we're about to do this, it's a major thing, we'll do it in 6 months? Or is the speed very, very fast?
I would say I'm very worried, and I'm very remorseful, I guess, every time we make the wrong choices, because we also make a lot of wrong choices. Right now, it sounds like it's this like zigzag kind of path. It's the path of a startup, and you make a lot of wrong choices as well that you don't talk about most of the time in podcasts. And it's always this kind of post-rationalizing how amazing all your foresight was, so amazing you took all these right choices. So at least in my mind, there's kind of at best kind of a 50-50 thing that these things that you're doing pay off, and you need to be like very quick to realize that you're making a mistake. And so when we're doing these things, it's usually with a very high degree of worry and with a very high degree of remorse from previous kind of erroneous decisions. And then I think, at least in my mind, worry and remorse tend to be like very big sources of, I don't know, monkey mind, or everything just kind of goes crazy in your head in a way, like, or you just have lots of thoughts all the time, and what if we do that? And it's very easy for it to sort of translate into apathy. So you kind of know that you just have to do it, but you're worried about it, so you're not doing it forcefully enough. And I think that the antidote, at least for me, is to try to just really cultivate joy and excitement about the future possibilities as the antidote to all your fear and worry about the things that can go wrong, and then try to find that energy and joy and excitement in yourself, and then just transmit it, not necessarily in explicit words, but in like every meeting when you're talking about kind of how we're going to do things with your team members, to just try to retain that optimism. For me, that's extremely hard, but the sort of the fundamental job that you have as a founder, and that's, to me, it's an extremely difficult thing to do.
It's interesting when you say that. As I've reflected on my career and I've had some time to step back from operating, one of the things I realize is almost what you just described. It's like a trick to play on yourself a little bit, like in terms of getting excited about that future and having to get the team excited, the investors excited. It's the anecdote. I like how you said, like, to basically deal with the stress and deal with all the risk. It's like, well, you get amped up, you get excited, you get everyone else excited. And it's kind of this, and actually in the case of you, it's almost like you've run 5 different companies in some way,
It is, yeah, for sure. And then I'm very fortunate to also have colleagues that it gets very energized and are very optimistic people. And optimism. I mean, people that aren't optimistic, it's going to be very hard to like run an adaptive company with pessimistic people. But also, like if I sorry if I surround myself, or if in any company you surround yourself with people that are exclusively optimistic, then it's also very easy to. So I mean, it's a tough balancing act, I suppose.
One of the things I'd like to just, you know, the global talent. Can you just share kind of where are the people who do this work for your customers? Where in the world are these people?
So when we started out, we thought that this kind of global online work thing was like primarily about kind of a cost thing and tried to find like lowest possible cost. And then we sort of realized that the problem that we're solving for our customers, which are primarily, at this point, enterprise technology companies, isn't really cost. I mean, most of them are just making so much money. And yes, they care about cost, but they care more about kind of efficiency and access to talent. And so while kind of hourly rates matter to some extent, at least what we've seen is that the best kind of product market fit for us is when we go and find like the very best people in creative hubs that traditional enterprise technology don't have access to. So if you're a technology company in San Francisco, it's fierce competition for designers, creative people in San Francisco, and it's just generally very hard. And then we go to Buenos Aires and Cape Town and Bogota and places in the world that have just amazing creative communities, and we try to find the very best people in those places, and that seems to work really, really well, both culturally and in terms of filling an access to talent gap for tech companies, not necessarily so much focusing on the cost aspect of things.
And so basically you're connecting these enterprises with this talent, and vice versa. Actually, the talent in Bhutan or wherever it is, they may not have been able to get access to do the work for that tech company. So you are really connecting those two sides of the equation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the opportunities for on the talent side is typically primarily in the local market, which is, I mean, I think generally less interesting than working for an American technology company. It's sort of like playing in the Premier League, and we are a way for the top players in the world to play in the Premier League. The political climate in the US sort of makes it generally very difficult to move from Latin America to the US and access the American labor market. And there are also some people that don't necessarily want to move to the US. I mean, there are
I think a lot
cool,
of people, yes.
cool cities elsewhere. And so we're sort of this bridge between top talent in cool places with good creative hubs.
How do you like when you find those creative hubs? Do you personally go? Do you have people who scout these creative hubs? How do you identify and nurture, let's say, that hub, that community?
I mean, it's all remote, virtual on the internet, and so we obviously go and meet people and so on, but we don't have any offices, and we don't have any kind of physical strategy. Maybe we should in our big in the biggest cities, and I probably should spend more time traveling. So the only limitation for me is just having 2 small kids, 2 and 4, that I would actually love to just bring along. But anyone that's spent 17 hours on an intercontinental flight with 2 kids,
especially 2 and 4. So when you think about AI, you mentioned it before. Like, what do you think it is going to do? I mean, specifically, let's focus on the creative market. Like, do you think that it means that each person can just do that much more work because they're using AI? Do you think each person can just do that much better work because they're using, one of these tools? Like, how does AI, where does it have the biggest impact, to work in your opinion?
Um, a few observations, I guess. So, firstly, it's going, it's going really fast, and it's definitely happening, but it's not kind of exploding in a way, like on the foundational model layer within design specifically, and I say that just to kind of set the ground for what we expect to be kind of a multi-decade type transition, more analogous to the digital transformation than anything else. I mean, it's going fast, but it's not kind of crazy. To give kind of one example, at the start of 2024, we forecasted that 50% of our volume would be AI generated by the end of the year. And then we ended up at around 25%, which is still, a lot. And I think we're probably far ahead of pretty much anyone else. But it's not kind of 50, it's not 100, but it's also not 0, right? So I just think it's important to bear in mind that the actual kind of outlook here is one of a reasonable middle ground in a sense. But for sure, like, definitely happening. Where is it happening the most? It's easy to assume that it's going to happen the most in this, like, that it's going to work from the bottom and up. That, I don't know, like aligning boxes in PowerPoint or resizing ads for different formats will be kind of the first thing to go. But then a sophisticated, creative strategist, that has amazing ideas and excellent taste cultivated through like a long life in the creative profession will be like impossible to replace. What we're seeing so far isn't necessarily like giving grounds for optimism for either of those two. It might very well be that creative strategy will be something that these AI tools will be very, very good at. And the experiments that we're running, where we're kind of A/B testing one concept that is AI generated versus a concept that is human generated side by side on Facebook, shows that it's pretty much already on parity. And so,
Wow.
it's hard to kind of say exactly where it will play out. I think on the project management layer, there's pretty significant opportunity to improve things, and that's a quite often overlooked area of importance in the creative process. Typically, project management is maybe 40% of total project time. And this is, briefing, back and forth on the brief, quoting, scoping, setting deadlines, all these things. And we believe that this is an area that we as a company can invest massively in and be very successful with. And the investments that we have made seems to be paying off on this project management layer, sort of automating away many of these things. Then we're also seeing on the positive side, I guess, for like the total volume of the market, is that there's just so many incredibly cool things that you can imagine will happen, right? And so you go to an e-commerce company today, and it's generally quite boring to be there. It's just pictures of simple. I mean, some e-commerces invest a lot in it, but it's not very high quality because you have 200,000 SKUs in an e-commerce. It's very costly to do production. But with AI, you can in theory make just incredibly immersive experiences for every single product, which presumably will be very costly to do. And so it's kind of the sky is kind of the limit on the amount of content experiences that you can create and the quality of those. So I don't know how it's going to play out, to be honest, but it's an exciting time.
That is exciting. I never thought about actually the e-commerce use case. You really could, because that would have taken human beings, to build those experiences, right? I mean,
yeah, and it would have, in many cases, have taken like physical models, right? You would need to have lots of young girls come in and be like, hey, you know, we're going to take your photos all day long with all of these clothes, and that's expensive. And you know, yeah. So if there's one career I don't really advise anyone these days, it's probably to be a fashion model.
One of the things, you know, when we talked about, you're in Oslo, and you know, and you're serving, like you mentioned, some of the biggest tech companies in the world, many in the US. You have your designers all over the world. What is your view of running this business from Oslo? Is it beneficial? Is it harder? Is it the same? Like, what do you think?
I think it's probably harder. And we're fortunate that we're very fortunate that the kind of the American business world is very open, generally speaking. You know, very easy, very, you know, we feel very included, we feel very fortunate. Our customers are generally amazing, and many of our customers actually are also, you know, immigrants, right? Like, so very often we kind of will meet an Argentinian creative director that used to live in Buenos Aires and then moved to Florida and you know, now runs the creative team for a large American technology company, and those guys are like, okay, you know, the Superside team is basically like me. They just wasn't able to get a green card, kind of. And so we get a lot of that very positive positive reception in the US, and we don't get the same in Europe. And I personally just have a hard time with many of the kind of startup ecosystems in Europe. I think they're just missing kind of the energy that is in the US. And every time I go to the US and meet customers and meet kind of investors and so on, it's like oxygen for me. You know, people just really want to help you out, and we try to cultivate that in Oslo, where all the, you know, startup founders in Oslo are like trying to help out, but it's just not the same. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but this kind of energy stuff is something that I'm definitely missing from living here. We started a company, lived in California for a few years, and so it's sort of that ethos. We did Y Combinator, etc. Like, that whole ethos is definitely with us, and we have, you know, the majority of our leadership team is still in the US, so we still have that ethos with us, but definitely something that I'm missing. On the plus side, of course, is that I get to live right next to a beautiful forest that goes all the way from Oslo to Trondheim, and it's like actually pretty wild and amazing forest with actual animals, and, you know, I get to be in nature quite a lot with, you know, my kids, and I get to be close to, you know, my parents and my wife's parents, and they help out with the kids, etc. So remote work, I think, has pros and cons, and it's hard to make a choice, but in the end, it's sort of up to each and every one. And kind of just living in San Francisco as well now is just kind of impossible, I think, for many people, just financially speaking. And we're also seeing kind of a lot of our customers kind of deliberately constructing teams where they're just trying to have fewer and fewer people in San Francisco, and then each person has like a 5-person remote team elsewhere in the world. So let's see how it plays out. But it's
What's interesting about the ecosystem, I think, is, and I didn't appreciate this when I was younger, is the power of having other people who have done it around you physically, in the same place, in the same city, who, to your point, want to help, share, support each other. And you see it in New York as an example. When I started Better Cloud here 13 years ago, there wasn't actually an enterprise ecosystem. And it was people said, you have to move to California. If you don't move to California, you won't be able to build the company. And in the beginning, it was true that there wasn't that ecosystem. But if you fast forward now 13 years, the ecosystem exists, the support system exists, and it makes a massive difference because I think also investors start to see that. They start to come around that ecosystem. They want to support it. Companies get bigger, they get acquired, they go public, people leave, they start their own companies. It's like a self-fulfilling, self-fueling ecosystem. So I get that in terms of the challenge, but then to your point, there's personal reasons,
But it is infectious, this energy, and I think in Europe now there are many places that has a certain pessimistic energy, and it might be right, it might be wrong. Like I don't try to kind of engage in these debates about regulation or taxes and so on. Like, sort of besides the point. Like you should probably, like as a founder, focus on building your company, but it creates a lot of just negative sentiment, and it's the same debate in Oslo or Paris or Brussels or Stockholm. It's like a lot of entrepreneurs that are just frustrated with the the amount of taxes and regulation that they're faced with, and I'm not sure if it's even that important for the outcome of the startup, but it creates this negative energy, which is very important for me because it's so hard already to do this startup journey, and you just really need all of the oxygen and all of the optimism and energy that you can get. And so if the whole startup ecosystem around you is just complaining about the taxes all the time, that's very emotionally taxing, at least on me. Yeah.
So you've been through multiple iterations of the business, and but you've scaled the business really well. You talk about the zigzag line. What is the biggest challenge you've ever faced at Superside, and how have you overcome that?
So for us, clearly COVID, when overnight we just got emails from 35-40% of our customers saying that they would cancel their accounts and they didn't expect to, pay their bills, and and overnight we were just like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And we weren't that big at the time. I think we were 150 people or so, but still a very kind of scary moment, and nobody really knew how it would play out. And for a few months, it was just incredibly hard, and we were just running the company in like full on war mode, like met all leadership team in the morning every single day, like met leadership team every single evening, kind of very late, just ran everything full on like wartime for a couple of months. And we didn't really know how we would survive, and if it had continued. And we weren't alone, kind of, there was like countless other companies in similar positions. But over time, and this took, I don't know, 3-4 months for us, like completely new companies or companies in sectors that expected to see huge growth would kind of come in, and they would see growth much stronger than before. So they just needed help immediately. And also people were suddenly okay with remote work, right? Because everyone was
Right.
working remotely anyways. And so what had previously been kind of a major kind of objection, especially for enterprise buyers who were like, how can you like actually physically do this? Like, how can we trust these guys? Legal teams would be, let's not work with these Superside folks. All of a sudden was like, those objections were pretty much muted and permanently solved in a sense. So for us, it ended up being a huge boon to the business, but very, very scary at the time.
When in the peak of that scariness, I mean, losing 35%, 40% of your revenue is terrifying. How did you deal with that? Like psychologically, did you deal with it? How did you?
I thought I think we made some bad decisions. We, at least in hindsight, I mean, we let some people go. Some people that were probably like we shouldn't have, and hopefully or fortunately they've always been well. But that's just very tough. But kind of given the foresight that we had, just very, very hard to say. And we were able to avoid kind of letting go more than very few
Yeah.
people, and we're very glad about that. But letting people go is terrible. Like it's incredibly emotionally challenging, at least for me, and I just really hate to do it. Emotionally, I guess it's also a situation which just gives you a lot of adrenaline. It's kind of like kill or be killed, or like you just have no other option but to fighting. I mean, I think a lot of people felt it like that in COVID as well, and it does force you to think in new ways and be more creative, and it did, at least for me, really kind of drive some sort of sense of urgency, enormous amounts of adrenaline, and just went full tilt for like 2-3 months like that. And so it was also probably at the same time the most productive and creative period in our company history. So I think we dealt with it. Well, but it was it was a scary time for sure.
Now you look out 3 years. You said, this is definitely seems like probably the most exciting time of Superside from what I've heard and from what I've read. You look out 3 years, 2028. What does Superside look like?
So we've spent 9 years now kind of building a tech platform for managing a creative process. It's been a huge investment, both in time and resources. And for the longest time, everyone was like, maybe can't we just use Asana or something and manage it there? And we were like, okay, committing. And then finally, like a couple years ago, people start saying, we really love this platform. It's amazing to interact with. It's super nice to have everything organized. It makes us all just more efficient. And now when AI came on stage, it sort of also allowed us to very quickly start to take advantage of all of these like digital intelligence that you could put into various places in our platform, and it's starting to become a real competitive advantage for us. And I think there's a quite clear path for us to grow the business very, very rapidly over the next 3 to 5 years and really show the world how it's possible to combine human labor with AI in a novel way in a professional services context. I expect that there will be new entrants, and maybe this is a good time. Probably this is a good time to disrupt all of the kind of traditional professional services companies. But I sort of expect a law firm, like an AI-powered law firm, to emerge, an AI-powered like general practitioner, an AI-powered media agency, and we see startups already doing that, and I think it's going to be amazing. There's a lot of dinosaur professional services companies out there, like, I don't know, like the big four audit companies. Audit work, I mean, I never did it, fortunately, but probably or hopefully like a big part of that could be assisted with AI. It might not necessarily be fewer auditors, but a new type of audit firm that competes with the traditional ones employing AI tools should be able to do a more
I agree
thorough,
with that.
better,
Yeah.
accurate, more faster, higher quality job. And, maybe PwC and Ernst & Young and all those guys are on the ball, but I'm sure there are some young and hungry, there should be some young and hungry kind of auditors leaving those companies now and spinning up startups trying to take on the incumbents.
So I'd like to transition a little bit to your background. Can you maybe share? So you're from Norway originally. Um, did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur?
No, I never knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. Um, but I knew that I liked to work hard. That was always, or I just never really minded working hard. Um, I was probably more serious, I guess, than many of my kind of high school friends, and knew that I definitely wanted to make some difference in the world, and that I wouldn't shy away from working hard to do so. I thought and then I was kind of obsessed with this notion of being free, um, and not having a boss. And I was always, I don't know, it was always hard for me to. I was drafted in the military. That was like a difficult context for me. Kind of being in a military hierarchy, like with teachers, was hard. I worked in consulting for a while with, at McKinsey and Company, which is just an incredible. I mean, they say like one of the core values in McKinsey is like being non-hierarchical, but it's like the most militaristic kind of hierarchical company out there, and it's very hard for me to be in this type of. So for me, it's very important to be free, and then I wanted for the longest time to go into academics actually, and just kind of be by myself and do research and something, and just be free. And maybe I'll go back to that lifestyle. I think a research career is lost on me, but I don't know, just sit by myself and read books and write. Maybe will be the next chapter. But that was kind of the overarching kind of motivation to be free, but also to kind of contribute in some kind of way, and then sort of more or less stumble into entrepreneurship.
What was the first company that you started?
So first company was I got a call from this German guys in Rocket Internet, which was this venture builder in Germany that sort of tried to set up e-commerce companies all over the world, and the pitch was basically, okay, go to Indonesia, kind of be the CEO of this e-commerce company there. We're gonna give you, a few $1 million in a bank account, and there's some kind of operation going already. Just try to grow it as quickly as you can. And I mean, to me, that sounded very exciting. Just jumped on the flight to Jakarta, lived there for a couple of years, and was part of scaling that company from until 750 people or so, and now sort of the largest fashion e-commerce in Indonesia, which was very exciting journey, but it wasn't really mine, or I didn't really kind of come up with the idea, and was sort of given the opportunity to be part of building it, and so wanted to start something of my own, and then started a couple of companies, out of which this one is by far the most successful.
Is there somebody that you look up to, or a mentor, someone that's been there throughout your career that's helped you on your journey?
I don't have a formal mentor, and I guess I have for the longest time, and probably still am, of this kind of school of thought of, the, I don't know, silent Nordic male that, wants to be self-reliant. It's like the ultimate, I don't know, masculine trait. You want to be self-reliant. And I think it's a good trait in many ways. Like, you don't want to kind of put all your problems on other people's shoulders. You want to be independent and so on. But the flip side of that is that you never really ask for advice. And I've had to like really work on myself to start asking people advice. And I don't know why, but it's foolish, right? Like, it's completely foolish to not ask for advice, because how can you possibly know the answer to everything yourself? Or, how can you possibly decide? And it's exhausting, right? Deciding everything for yourself. So why just not ask other people, like, what do you think? And it's, okay, you've thought about this a little more than me. Let's just go with your, let me listen to you. So for me, it's been hard to get into that mindset, but being in a startup and having the market forces as your preeminent boss forces you to seek advice, I think. And so for me, it's been very disciplining in that sense, and really made me much, much better in that sense, and forced me to open up and, I guess, ask my coworkers and our investors and my friends and everyone for their advice. I probably should do it much, much more, but at least there's like now a conscious admission that this is something that I need to do.
How do you balance your family with a fast growing company with a lot of employees all over the world? Like, how do you, let me say, do you have work-life balance? Do you believe in work-life balance?
Yeah, I believe in I believe it. Most people work somewhat similar hours. Like, there's a lot of incredibly capable, successful people that, I don't know, work 40 or like 45 hours per week. There's others that work 55. I don't know if it makes that big of a difference. Like, I'm not sure if this was even a debate in like the 1920s. I'm not sure if it's like Einstein and John von Neumann was like, Einstein, you just need to like put in more hours and push harder, and then you'll break through. Like, I don't think it's kind of the right lens to look at the world. In a way, I think the right lens to look at it is you need to be like really committed, right? And by committed, I mean you need to spend the time in your shower thinking about stuff at work, and not what you're gonna have for dinner or something. Like, you just need to be focused and committed. And then the number of hours is, at least to me, somewhat secondary. I don't think you can work like 35, 40 hours. I think like you kind of need to get to some kind of minimum. To me, probably like 45, 50 hours, which is doable to combine with kids. You kind of, at least for me, I wake up and spend a couple hours with the kids in the morning, then or I don't know, we're pretty slow to get them to daycare. I'm sure it can be done faster. And then they're in daycare, and then I hang out with them a couple of hours when they get home from daycare, and then I work a couple hours in the evening, and that sort of works out for me. But again, the work life or the balance, or what I feel maybe more often bad conscience versus my kids about, isn't the time commitment, but it's just kind of being with them, and then they want to like play some game or whatever, and I'm thinking about some work problem, right? And so that's sort of the sacrifice that I think you kind of have to make.
I really like this committed. I tell people, especially young people, I tell them all the time, their first job out of school, whatever. I tell them all the time, it's not actually the number of hours. It makes some difference, but it's in the hours. How focused, and I like the word committed, are you to the work you're doing? if you're sitting there scrolling Instagram or TikTok or whatever in the middle of doing your work, that 1 hour is not the same as if you're locked in, everything's off, and you work for an
Completely.
hour.
I mean, it's super easy to just waste 50 hours. You
Yeah.
go to all kinds of meetings, and it's super easy to just. So just making sure that it's effective, I think, is more important. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What is, knowing everything you know today? You've had a pretty storied career already. Knowing everything you know today, what is one piece of advice you would go back and give yourself before you started your career?
A lot of people probably also start in a founding journey from some sense of like grandiosity, some like sense that you're better than others, or that you're just exceptionally talented, or like you have really good ideas, or some self-aggrandizing kind of notion. I think it's very common, and to some extent it's good, right? Like what would the world have been without no pretentiousness at all, right? Like if no pretentiousness was allowed, very very little probably good art or good music would flourish. So I think it's an important driving force, but it sort of risks stopping you from developing, and especially from developing in a structured way. And I think many people, myself included, have not worked on themselves in a structured enough way. I started working with a coach for the first time like 5-6 months ago. I've been just hugely skeptical of coaches and all this kind of industry of like, I see it to some extent like as a paid friend kind of thing, and I have a lot of friends that I don't have to pay to hang out with me. So I've been just very skeptical of this concept. And then we did this like 360 review of me, and let's see how the coach thing worked. I mean, he's great. It's nothing kind of, but let's see. It's more on me, like to what extent am I able to. But we did this like 360 review, and board members, early investors, colleagues, everyone was kind of like spent an hour filling out everything about me, and it wasn't like anything particularly damaging. It's not like, it hasn't kept me up at night. We got this like rating on, how visionary, execution, relationship builder like scores, and my coach is like 75 years old. He's OG. He's not like, find your strength kind of guy. He's like, okay, you suck at this kind of approach. And the takeaway for me was like, on most of these things, I'm pretty average, right? And that was, at first I was like very angry at that, like, I'm this amazing guy, I'm, those guys have like, reviewers, they've totally misunderstand me. I'm just so much better than what they think. But then, and this was average in like a, peer group of other CEOs, and I started thinking about it more and more, and over time it's become just incredibly motivating for me to just be like, okay, I'm average in this group of relatively competitive group of CEOs, and I just really want to get better. This startup acts as a very potent kind of personal development vehicle for me. It's obviously important that all the things that we're doing and people's jobs, and that's obviously like most 90% important, but it also acts as a very powerful personal development vehicle for me. I'm average, and it's about time to sort of start taking advantage of the opportunity to become really good at what I do, and it because it's fun to be good at what you do, and much more fun than to be average. And so advice to younger self is probably to, especially if you're like 26 years old and starting out founding a company, you probably are at best average, but there are ways to like significantly improve if you are working deliberately.
And if you acknowledge, if you're self-aware and acknowledge that. I like that.
I think so. I think so. So I remain optimistic about my own ability to improve, but let's see.
I like that. If people want to connect with you, what is the best way? Is it LinkedIn, some other social media, email? What's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is great, actually. Yeah, just send me a message on LinkedIn. LinkedIn there's a lot of spam these days, so it might take some days to go through. But I do try to respond to every single kind of serious mail or in-mail message.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you say? Yeah, that I get on LinkedIn. So
Great.
So try that out. And if you're serious buyer of our services, you can also drop me an email at fredrik@superside.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Awesome. Fredrik, I really appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you being so open and transparent and sharing your thoughts. I think lots for people to learn from this and from your experience. So thank you very much for doing this.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciated being part of it.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please share it with your networks, like, subscribe, rate it, all of that. And we'll see you for the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.